On a serious note, I'm here today to talk about one of the worst open secrets in the city's history. It is that Black Bohemians played a major role in the birth of Miami. This historical fact is rarely, if ever, talked about in the way that I will briefly demonstrate this morning. Even more, the contributions Black Bohemians made to the very foundation of Miami, both structurally and politically, cannot be overstated. But it is the political angle that deserves the larger spotlight, so that in the future it is celebrated, acknowledged, and never forgotten. Keeping the contributions of Black Bohemians from the front pages or the main pages of Miami's rich history could potentially send a message that says that they don't matter. As many of you know, we're just a few months away from celebrating Miami's 125th year of incorporation. And by now, perhaps you all know the story from July 28, 1896. In the state of Florida, at this time, at least 25 registered voters were necessary to form a town, and at least 300 voters were needed to incorporate as a city. Henry Flagler had no interest in being a town. He was called a benevolent dictator back in the day. Neither did Julia Tuttle and Mary Brickell. But despite their incredible visions for Miami as a world-class southern city, Julia Tuttle and Mary Brickell were not allowed to vote. The passage of the 19th Amendment would not happen for another almost 25 years. But did you know this? The white incorporators turned to an unlikely group of eligible voters, Black men, who made up more than half of the required 300 voters to become a city. In other words, Miami would have had to organize first as a town without the participation of the 162 Black male voters who were living in Miami to do the painstaking, backbreaking work of clearing land and helping to construct many of Miami's early institutions. This is the political side of the story that I mentioned that deserves a larger spotlight. And I want to be clear here, according to historical documents, 162 of Miami's 300 city founders are Black Bohemians. For most of the Black voters at the incorporation meeting that day, they were simply following what their white bosses ordered them to do, because not following their orders would mean no work and no way to continue to feed their families. But as pointed out by Howard Kleinberg, a former Miami Herald history columnist, there was one independent man in particular who played a more dominant role at the incorporation meeting in 1896. Kleinberg discovered that Isidore Cohen, a Miami pioneer, wrote about the incorporation meeting in 1896 in a diary. And in it, Cohen apparently said, and pardon the language here, that, quote, a darky named Lightbourne delivered the best speech in 1896. The only Lightbourne at the incorporation meeting was Alex C. Lightbourne. We will hear much more about Mr. A.C., as it turns out, A.C. Lightbourne, later today when you grant his descendants here a proclamation. But if you will, let's take a quick second to reflect on that historical moment. Safe to say this was a meeting for Mr. Lightbourne to be seen and not heard. Yet he was bold, fearless, confident, smart, daring, and unafraid to meet the moment. Sounds like Miami to me. He deserves to be remembered. As written in Thelma Peters' book, Lemon City Pioneering on Biscayne Bay, 1850 to 1925, in chapter 13, titled The Blacks of Lemon City, there were at least 3 identifiable Black communities. Nazarene, also called Nazarene, and Knightsville, which were close to one another, and Bullstown, all dating back to about 1900. But unlike the city of Miami, Lemon City was never incorporated, even though the small, thriving farming community was, according to Peters, here first. From the video clip that was put together by a film crew by the city of Miami, you're going to see and hear much more about these communities and how the name Lemon City vanished from the map by about 1925. Now, I began by saying that this is one of Miami's worst open secrets. By acknowledging Lemon City, a vibrant, mostly Black community, the 164 Black Bohemian incorporators were founders who made it possible for Miami to become a city in 1896. The Black Bahamian workers who clear the land with hours of backbreaking work from sunup to sundown for only $1 a day. You say to our city's black ancestors that you matter. And to historians and activists like Dr. Enid Pinckney and Dr. Dorothy Fields Jenkins, the founder of the Black Archives Foundation, you say that your years of work to preserve the legacy of Lemon City matter. And what better way to say that you matter than by making sure all of Miami's founders are remembered, not just the names that we're all familiar with, like Flagler, Tuttle, and Bricker. And I don't see the mayor, but Mr. Mayor, it's another way of saying Miami for everyone. A phrase that you're quite familiar with. As promised, here's the video presentation to highlight the unveiling of markers in what used to be Lemon City, Nazarene, Knightsville, and Goldstown to future generations. Take a look at the bottom.